If you remember from the last lesson, sometimes cross multiplying doesn't work, it gets too big, that kind of thing. It also doesn't work if you have a situation like this, where you have two fractions on one side and then a fraction on the other side. So what you want to do is just like what we did in the last problem. You want to get a common denominator. So as we look at this, our common denominator would be, well, they both have, well, two of them have an x and one of them has a 2. So your common denominator is going to be 2x. So what we'll do is we'll get a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 2, multiply by x, and multiply by 2. So now I have 8 over 2x plus 5x over 2x equals negative 22 over 2x. And so just like I talked about before, we're all worried about this equal sign, the fact that this is all equal. Well, the bottom is already equal. Since we have a common denominator, they're all the same. So now we need to focus on the top. So I'm just going to take the top now. So I'm just going to have 8 plus 5x equals negative 22, which is pretty easy to solve. We'll subtract 8. So 5x equals negative 30. Divide by 5, and x equals negative 6. And remember, the only thing you really have to check on is that if I go back to the original, that if I plug in negative 6, that I won't get a 0 on the bottom. And you don't, so your answer is x equals negative 6. Of course, the denominators get a little bit more complicated. Like in this one, I have an x plus 1 and an x minus 1. And then the other thing you have to remember is, you see this 3 right here? That's 3 over 1. So that is also something that needs to have a common denominator. So as I look at my denominators, I've got an x plus 1 in both of these, so that'll be part of my denominator. This one has an extra x minus 1. So as I multiply by common denominators here, I'm going to have to multiply by an x minus 1 top and bottom. This one already has everything, and then the 3 is going to need an x plus 1 and an x minus 1 on the top and the bottom. Now remember, after I do this, all the bottoms are going to be the same, so I really don't care about the bottom anymore. I am just going to work with the top. So as I do this work, I'm just worrying about the top. So I start by multiplying those out using the box or just a FOIL method. You get 4x squared plus x minus 4x minus 1, and then it equals, now I didn't multiply this fraction by anything, so it'll equal 12 plus, and then this right here, if I multiply that out as x squared minus 1. So then as I take that times 3, I get 3x squared minus 3. Remember, I don't need the bottom now because it's a common denominator, so now it's just a matter of getting everything to one side so it equals 0, and also simplifying. So if I subtract 3x squared from both sides, I am going to get 1x squared. Now if I take these two and put them together, I get minus 3x, and then minus 1 equals, now these cancel out over here, I have a minus 3 and a 12, that gives me 9, so now I need to move the 9 over, so I have x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0, and now if you use a box or just double bubble, we get x and x, and I believe 5 and 2 will work with the negative 5 and a positive 2. So now I take x minus 5 equal to 0 and x plus 2 equal to 0. And so we get x equals 5 and x equals negative 2. And once again, I go back up to the beginning and I check if I plug in a 5, if I plug in a negative 2, am I going to get any zeros on the bottom? And I don't, so I'll go with these two answers. So now it's just a matter of practicing. You'll see this one actually isn't all that bad because I already have x plus 1 as my denominators. So I have an x plus 1 there, I have an x plus 1 there. So, but I don't have common denominators yet because this 4 is 4 over 1. And so that one still needs an x plus 1. So now my denominator is the same, so I can just work with the top. So I've got 5x equals. Now I need to take that 4 and multiply it through, so I get 4x plus 4. And then minus 5. So if I simplify that, I've got 5x equals 4x minus 1. Subtract 4x, and I get x equals negative 1. Now if I go back to the beginning, if I plug in negative 1 here, I get a 0 on the bottom, which means negative 1 cannot happen. So I actually have to cross that off. And since that was my only answer, that means I actually have no solutions for this problem. Okay, so once again, we just practice here. This is over 1. If I factor this, will be x plus 2, x minus 2. So now it's just a matter of what are we missing in each one. This one needs an x plus 2. And these both need an x plus 2, x minus 2. So up here, if I multiply that out, I will get 3x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 4. Of course, use the box if that was confusing to you. On the next one, that's just a 6. I didn't need to get anything for common denominator. If I multiply those together, I'll get x squared minus 4. And if I multiply through by 1, that'll give me plus x squared minus 4. And now all we have to do is finish solving this. So let's just simplify what we can on each side. So we still have 3x squared plus 4x minus 4. And then over here, the 6 and the 4 can go together, so we have x squared plus 2. And now I'm going to move everything to one side so that it's equal to 0. So we have 2x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Now before I double bubble, I'm actually going to take out a 2 because it'll make my life a lot easier. So we get x squared plus 2x minus 3. So now all I have to do is double bubble the polynomial there. So we've got x and x, 3 and 1, positive 3, negative 1. So then as I solve, remember 2 equals 0 doesn't work, so we can kind of ignore that. So x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. That gives us x equals negative 3 and x equals 1. Once again, I'm going to go up to the beginning and I'm going to say if I plugged in negative 3, is that okay? And I don't get 0, so it'll be fine. And if I plug in 1, will I get 0 there? No. So that'll be fine also. So my two answers are negative 3 and 1. Alright, so I don't know that I need to do that one again. We'll get plenty of practice in class, I think. So there you go. It's our last lesson of this chapter, so the next thing we'll do is get ready for a test.